Question 30A from the improving performance option, and 30A was an 8-mark question, and that read, discuss the characteristics of an overtrained athlete. The discussion of the overtrained athlete, if we look at the dot point that it comes from, we can see that it's from this dot point of planning to avoid overtraining, amount and intensity of training, physiological considerations, example, lethargy, injury, the psychological considerations, e.g. the loss of motivation. The things that we're asked to do as a student is analyse overtraining by considering such questions as how much training is too much, how would you identify an overtrained athlete, which is basically what we need to do, what do you do if you identify an overtrained athlete, and how can overtraining be avoided. So that's the syllabus dot points that we're looking at. The key term in this particular question again was the discussion or discuss, and that requires us to identify issues and provide points for and against. And again, the discussion, challenged some students, but some students handle it really well. If we look at some of the guidelines that we had for this particular question, and again, if we look at the top band, that's what we should be interested in. To get a 7 or 8, you need to discuss the characteristics of an overtrained athlete. So what are the different aspects or characteristics that exist for an overtrained athlete? Present them in a logical and a cohesive manner. Illustrate with relevant examples. So if you're able to do that, then you would have been able to put yourself in that bracket to get a top band mark of a 7 or 8. Included in your response, you needed to do this. You needed to firstly show the characteristics, maybe physiological, to do with the body, to do with how the body functions and the ability of the body to deal with stresses. That would be the physiological aspect, and then the psychological nature of these characteristics. And this is the general understanding that you need to have. You'll be able to look at the psychological as well, and understand that to do with how the athlete prepares mentally and psychologically. As we just pointed out, is the mental aspect of the preparation. You need to relate that back to the characteristics that are going to suffer for this particular athlete. Physiological symptoms, so some of the things that you would see in terms of what you need to discuss would be, firstly, the performance would suffer. So athletes would suffer in terms of not being able to perform as they have done in the past and as they would like. Some specific decreases in strength and speed may have been some other things that you may have discussed. Injury might be another factor that increases due to overtraining. You may have discussed increases in resting heart rate or heart rates that take place and measurements that take place through different exercises, and if there are variations or increases in that. Weight loss might be another indication of overtraining, where the athlete is training too much and as a result they lose weight and strength. They may have things like susceptibility to head colds, chronic fatigue, and other types of illnesses or conditions that exist for the athlete. They may take longer to recover, and this would be highlighted through the lack of ability to remove lactic acid from the body. Some of the psychological symptoms or characteristics that may exist for the athlete that you needed to discuss would be lack of motivation, so the ability to actually want to participate in training and or competition. Insomnia would be considered a psychological symptom, where an inability to sleep. Feelings of exhaustion, so they actually feel exhausted as well as are being exhausted, but they actually feel that. Increased emotion, so they may feel different levels or increased levels of various emotions. Social isolation, where they remove themselves from the team or from the group, and they may also experience aggression. So the for and against, students needed to identify, plus the issues for and against overtraining, and for each of those characteristics. So that's what we're looking at as a response, or some of the things you needed to discuss in this response. Now, if we have a look at a sample answer from one of our cohort, the first thing that I noticed is it's clearly written, easy to read, and then in that first opening paragraph, they've identified that there are psychological and physiological conditions that are associated with overtraining for the athlete. Explanation of what they are, and then discussion of how they affect, and use of examples. A wide range of physiological and psychological characteristics have been presented here, and they relate very well back to what the question is asking in terms of what are the characteristics of overtraining for an athlete. Psychological considerations mentioned here, and as pointed out, you needed to discuss both those areas. The use of examples, you can see that the highlight has been used there for this particular student, which makes clarity and a logical response being presented